Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Now let us continue with the second session on how can banking and financial services adapt to the next normal. For this very special session, we have many honorable speakers. First, Her Excellency Chea Serey, Assistant Governor from the National Bank of Cambodia. Second, Mr. Somkid Jiranuntarat, Board Member of Digital Government Development Agency. He's also advisor to CEO of Krung Thai Bank and Board Member of Axon Education. Third, Professor Olinga Taeed, Expert Advisor from the China E-Commerce Blockchain Committee. And this session will be moderated by Mr. Warachat Lakhanarod, Country Head of Grab Financial Group. Kun Warachat is an alumni of this program in 2018. He has 17 years experience in banking business, ranging from corporate banking, payment, credit cards, and fintech. Now he is currently taking care of overall business expansion, covering Thailand, Cambodia, and Myanmar. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to pass the floor to Mr. Warachat.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to the first panel discussion segment today. Here with me is Mr. Somkid, Director of the Digital Government Agency. And in the line today, we have Professor Olinga, Expert Advisor on the China E-Commerce and also the blockchain. We also have Her Excellency Chea Serey to come to the panel discussion. So because we already have quite a few delays, I'll just jump right into the question today. We have quite a full list of questions that I'm preparing, especially to ask all of the distinguished guests today. First, I'd like to ask everyone to briefly introduce yourself and perhaps share some of your thinking around the big changes and the top three impact that you have seen because of the COVID in your perspective. Let me ask Mr. Somkid to kickstart.
Good morning. Thank you, Bank of Thailand, for inviting me to this webinar. Myself is Somkid Jiranuntarat, always working in the technology sector the whole of my career. I was CIO from Thailand, and I was CIO for banking industry. So I've been working for the capital market, been working for banking industry for more than 30 years. And now I'm a retired officer, but still working. Now I work as an advisor to Krung Thai Bank CEO, and mostly working on the government project. There are quite a few projects that is interesting and going into the digital transformation. During COVID, what I can see the change is that during the lockdown, we can see that there are limited physical movement. And because of that limited physical movement, people changing the behavior to the grand scale. There are quite a few people who never been in the digital world have tried. We start working from home. We start order food online. We start order merchandise online, and also we start doing a lot of things from the digital world. What we can see from the banking world is that we can see that a lot of volume from mobile banking has increased and increased terrifyingly. A lot of banks having problem on this increase of volume. But I think it is a good sign that people now get used to and get into the digital economy more. I mean, in my generation, baby boomer generation, there are quite a few people that I know get into this digital economy starting from COVID-19. What I can see another aspect that there are a lot of organizations has prepared themselves for the next future digital world. There are quite a few banks have prepared themselves on building up the capability
building up the team that, prepare to get into the more digital economy world. I think what we can see during COVID-19 is just the snapshot of digital economy. The real digital economy, the real digital transformation for the financial industry has not come to the full scale yet. Once it comes to full scale, I think, in my opinion, in my imagination, it's quite scary.
So thank you, Mr. Somkid, for the first thought. Maybe I would like to invite Her Excellency Chea Serey to share your thought and perhaps introduce yourself a little bit to all of the people in the call today. Perhaps we have some difficulty on the connection. Maybe I'll ask to Professor Olinga. Can you hear us, Professor? Yeah. Okay. Please share, quickly introduce yourself, and perhaps you can share some of your thoughts on the 3 biggest changes or impact that you have seen.
Yeah, certainly. Can you see me on the screen? I can't see myself. Okay,
I can see you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So I guess the 3 things are, we in the past 6 months, maybe 9 months, we have seen a big movement from central banks towards digital currency, and each of them now we advise. And I should tell you that I run a large think tank, the largest think tank on the movement of value. It's based in the UK, and we advise the Chinese government, UK, the government Swiss, and now a lot of the Middle East countries, Dubai and Saudi, etc. And the big movement has been they now have a digital strategy toward digital currency and digital tokens, and either they've brought them out, like in China, or they're preparing to bring them out. So that's one big movement. The second one, I think, is more in Europe. We're seeing a challenger banks are now coming in with open banking systems. And so open banking systems are those with APIs and many other things around behavior and reward and so on. And so these open banking systems have been there for about the last 5 years, but only now in the last 9 months come to the fore through these, but they're small still challenger banks. And the third area is, because as the introduction has so kindly reconfirmed the movement of digital banking, there is now there's a big emphasis on focus on expertise required for digital tools. And these are what we call 4th industrial revolution technologies. And that's DLT, that's distributed ledger technology, blockchain, AI, Internet of Things, and 5G. And in certain countries, these are ahead, like in China, they're way ahead. And, in other countries, it's only just begun. I just, before I pass on to my colleague from Cambodia, I should say to you, I was born in Laos myself. Although I'm in the UK now, I was born in Vientiane, and my son's name is Vientiane. And so this is I have great affinity with the region. So thank you very much for inviting me, and I would love to hear from my colleague now.
Thank you very much. That is a very lovely put there. And very interesting that you talk about digital currency, the API, and digital banking. So now, Her Excellency already back into the live with us. Would like to hear some thought from you on the 3 kind of big changes that you have seen during the COVID.
Yes, hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
So just by way of introductions, my name is Serey, and I work for the National Bank of Cambodia for 20 years now. And my area of focus are economic policies and research, banking operation, reserve management, and payment system. But my passions lies on financial inclusions and women economic empowerment. There's a lot of work I've done on that. In terms of the 3 changes that I've noticed during the past 9 months of COVID outbreak, I would say one is internet connectivity. Now everything happened online. I mean, the previous speaker spoke about increase in e-commerce transactions and payment, etc. One thing that frustrates me is the connectivities. Obviously, just now I was cut off because the internet was not stable. I think that is something that as not just the banking industry, but the government need to think, sort of rethink about their priorities in terms of infrastructure investment. Is it going to be road and bridges, or do we want more broadband connections? And this is a very fundamental question to be asked because we have limited resources, and so we have to think what we want to do. The second thing that I've noticed, of course, is increase in e-commerce transactions. I have a 16-year-old daughter who 3 or 4 times a day would give our address to a complete stranger, and it's perfectly fine for me right now, which I wouldn't accept as a year before. So that's something that is happening, and it's real. The only thing I understand that this is at a very early stage of e-commerce, particularly for a country like Cambodia. So there need to be more sort of coordinations among the different players to come together. That has been something that I've been testing with a lot of e-commerce players here, see whether we can integrate everyone onto the same platform. The third things I've noticed is e-payment, obviously, because you do e-commerce. Previously, what happened here is e-commerce transactions happen. The payment for e-commerce, even though it's ordered online, you don't have a physical locations, but the payment usually happened at the delivery time, which if you look at it from an SME perspective, it's quite bad because you have to come up with your own capital to get the goods and then deliver it and then get the money. Versus if you were to get your payment online beforehand, then you have fun to sort of use it and do something with it. So in this area, what I've seen is that now people tend to pay their e-commerce online as well through the e-payment gateway. And that's something that is, for me, as somebody who wants to promote financial inclusions and women economic empowerment, is wonderful. The thing is, will our banking industry be enough to
Her Excellency made, and I think I'm second that opinion that the digital infrastructure is so important, because if we wanted to build a rocket to Mars, at least we have to get the internet to be stable first. I ever thought that. And I think that the point that also Her Excellency made on the payment, the e-payment, is also very crucial, especially during the COVID, whereby e-commerce has been growing super fast, but then lots of people still relying heavily on cash, and obviously cash is something that for us in this generation consider something that is pretty dirty, because it is inefficient to use cash anymore. It doesn't make sense, and this create a lots of like a problem and issue to the whole ecosystem. Because I'm from Grab, which is maybe by the time while we are waiting for Her Excellency to come back, I'd like to share like a few thoughts around like the Grab ecosystem, that why we kind of like crazy, on pushing the cashless transaction, because we know that all of our drivers are struggling when they have to carry the cash to pay to the food merchant in order to get the food and deliver the food to the customer, and then collect the cash from the customer, and then they have to go on and on for so many rounds. Versus if the whole flow is cashless, then it's very easy and very simple to the driver to just stop by at the food restaurant, pick up the food, and then drop at the customer house, and then they just move on. So things get much more efficient with all the cashless. But back toพี่สมคิด point, we still need to think about infrastructure นะครับพี่ like how are we going to make sure that when the peak hour, like during lunchtime or month end, what's your thought around solving all of that infrastructure?
I think this, especially for Thailand, it is the whole system. It's not just one bank as a whole, because all the banks in Thailand are connected through the switching company. And once problem occur at any one bank, it can spread out to other banks as well. So everyone has to be responsible for their own infrastructure. And I think regulator also play a big part in this. The last few years, we also have this kind of scenario. And we have the guideline to all the bank and switching company that at least they should have two times of the capacity all the time. That's why they have to prepare for improve or upgrade their infrastructure always.
So that is a very valid point. Just to share thought when we within Grab when we talk about customer experience, user experience. Actually, what we talk about the best user experience is the stability of the system, because you have to get the customer to be able to use your platform before you talk about building like a very beautiful UI, UX or whatever, right?
I think also people has a misconception on capacity. Capacity in the testing environment are unequal to capacity in the real production environment. Because real production environment, there are a lot more bottleneck somewhere.
That is so
you have
true.
To be careful.
Maybe I'll move on to the second question while we are waiting for the other guests to connect back. But I think the second question is actually something that I designed especially to ask P. Somkid. So I think we have seen a lot of people talk about the acceleration of digital transformation. But I think different organizations, different company, or even regulators, government are having a different priority. May I ask from your perspective, because I think you are working in both worlds, right? You also serve a private sector and also government sector. What is your thought around the priority on digital transformation?
I have been trying to work on digital transformation for at least 4 years, right? Since I was chairman of Kasikorn Business Technology Group. The mission is to transform the bank to the digital economy. But what I see from my trial to be a digital banking is that the prioritization, right? Whether the leader of the organization can feel the future world. If they don't feel that they'll be disrupted. So it's very difficult in some situation to prioritize, right? During the competing of resources, how do you prioritize the resource? Do you prioritize it to the future or do you prioritize it to the existing? Another question that always coming is cannibalization. When you come to the question of cannibalization, who is the leader who say, I want to get rid of this in spite of huge revenue still coming, but I want to go for the future. It's not easy, right? And thirdly, how you organize the governance and structure. Do you want the digital banking to be in the traditional bank, or do you want to spin out to form the new digital banking? There are trade-offs between these two approaches. I'm not convinced to either one approach. I think there should be still a leverage of resource and capability from the traditional banking, but the mindset of the new banking should be formed separately. So if we can leverage the capability from the whatever we have, and we can set up the new mindset, I think that's the approach that I'm looking for.
Very interesting, P. Somkid. So back to Her Excellency. I think that the question that I'm asking Mr. Somkid right now from his business or government kind of project perspective, would like to hear from you on the regulatory perspective that what would be the top priority in the world that digital transformation is acceleration right now. What is your thought around that?
Sorry, could you repeat it again?
So we are talking about people keep talking about digital transformation that accelerate right now because of the COVID. But different organizations, we have a different priority, right? So we already hear from the business side from Kun Somkid. Now, I would like to hear from the regulatory perspective on what would be your top priority around the digital transformation.
Okay. So first of all, sorry that the connections, usually it's worked fine. It's just today, it just wanted to prove my point that we need better broadband connectivity. It's back to your question about digital transformations. I think from the regulator perspective, this is a very uncharted territory for us. Right, it's happened so fast, and of course, the private sector are moving much faster than us. But as a regulator, we tend to be more conservative and try to understand what are the implications of those transformations, what are the benefits that bring, also what are the risks. And so, from the regulatory perspective, I think we look at, of course, cybersecurity, the confidentialities of the information. And eventually, we are here not just to suffocate innovations, but we also want to promote it. So we need to look at what are the rules that we need to have in place to further encourage the innovative ideas. So, of course, we're looking at sandbox regulations. In Cambodia, we don't have that, but we have something that is quite similar, even though we don't call it sandbox. But basically, is to allow private sector to experiment. The next things that we are also looking is trying to see in terms of cross-border data sharing. That is something that is very crucial as a region, how we can do this and do this safely, bearing in mind that each country has different rules in terms of data sovereignties, in terms of many other things. So it's not going to be something that is easy for us as policymakers, but definitely something that we are willing to sit with the private sector and explore how we can help. But also we need the private sector to understand what are our limitations, what are our concerns, what are our challenges. I think only with dialogue that we can move this forward together.
I think, after hearing from the regulatory perspective, I'd like to move to Professor Olinga. Previously, you touched on the digital currency, something that a regulator might really want to, have something more to explore or to understand, right? You also touched on some of the new key technology like API or the digital banking trend. So, in your opinion on the technology perspective, what has changed during the COVID, or is there any new trend that coming in because of COVID, or is this still the same, like pre or post COVID? Can you share your thought on that, Professor?
Okay. Yes, certainly. Thank you very much for that. It's actually the last crisis we had was, of course, our crisis, wasn't it? The banking crisis in 2008. It devastated the world, and we were responsible for everything in the world suddenly collapsing. And it was a big responsibility. And I'm just going to share with you a few really simple slides to give you let's have a look. Just for you to illustrate the huge difference between our very little money post 2008. And so what they did was each government brought in strategies to move value from the private sector into community directly. And that was often done, it's around 2% was moved. And that was either done through procurement regulation, where public sector was moving value through procurement. They were saying things like you cannot get a government contract unless you deliver value into the community, like a social value or corporate social responsibility. India, Indonesia, Mauritius, many countries in Europe had 2% levy put on them to bring social results. And philanthropy in America, we have never broken in America the 2% ceiling. So that was then. Now, if you look at what's happening now, you will see banking is nowhere to be seen. The crisis has happened now. Community is the main, we people are the main holders of the key asset, which is data. And the big guys who are moving in this area, like Facebook, like Google, Instagram is part of Facebook, like Amazon grew during COVID-19. It didn't shrink, it has grown. Like TikTok, like WeChat, these companies are transactions of not money, but data. And so the community now in this, as we go forward, it's not much about money, it's about data moving from the community, which is full of rich data, into the private sector, our personal data. Even the big movements like COVID-19, like Black Lives Matter, like climate change, etc., are guides for governments to find out awareness of where to put their money in. And governments are also using massive amounts of data now. In China, we have, for example, a social credit system. We monitor the movement of everyone everywhere in China. The physical movement is monitored everywhere. We have facial recognition and so on. And so data has become the new currency that replaced the dollar. And that is a huge transformation that's happened here. I won't go on because I know we're running late here. But so we are not at all at the same level. We're not at all talking about the same thing anymore. We are now talking about data as a new currency, and banks have become a service provider, an instrument like internet. The banking and the internet are just commodities. Data is the new currency that we're dealing with around the world. And that's the key change.
Thank you, Professor. This is very interesting. I find these three simple slides very helpful and also help frame our thinking around the movement of the value between the private, public, and also community. Thank you for the very insightful information. I think lead to from all of these three slides that we talk about the value between private, public, and also community. I'd like to lead to the next question to Mr. Somkid to share with us around like in Thailand, and specifically in the last 6 months, I've seen so many projects that driven by P. Somkid and team around like G Wallet, the government wallet, the wallet to buy the government bond, and also recently we have the program so-called เราเที่ยวด้วยกัน or we travel together, in which we have seen the API connect between the government and the private sector. So in your perspective, what would be the next big thing for the government to do something like this in order to fight against the economic downturn during the COVID?
I think what we have done in the past few months, we have a few projects leveraging on government policy. With that government policy, we can see a lot of data that generated from the platform. With that generated data, I think it will form in the future the right policy from the government to the right people. Because in the next generation or the next digital world, data is so important. With that platform, what we're trying to do, not just generating the data to people concerned, but also we try to build the platform as an open platform. What we mean by open platform is very similar to Professor has said. It's the API economy. With the API economy, so we can have digital ID in the platform. We can have even digital currency in the platform. Without digital ID and digital currency, I think we're not going full scale to the digital economy. And with that in mind, with digital ID and digital currency, what we can see as a trend, big trend, is the disintermediation for the industry, especially financial sector. It will be disintermediary, and what I can see personally is that there will be a change in the structure of the financial sector. For example, what we try to do is we establish the bond, government bond platform. With the bond platform, if we can establish the primary market and secondary market effectively, and we can create liquidity in the secondary market. This will create another channel of saving that people will go into this more and more because there are more interest, there are more liquidity, and they are more secure with the government bond. And this could disrupt the saving for the banking.
Totally agree.
So this is this is just starting. There are quite a few opportunities out there in the digital economy.
I'll just second P. Somkid's opinion that I'm also the customer of the G Wallet and the government bond wallet.
Have you buy the government
of
bond?
Of course, Kapi. And I think for the very first time, at least in my generation, maybe we are same generation, but at least to me, that is the very first time that I have seen bond sales digitally, and it's sold out within 1 hour, right?
Within
Within-
the first time within 99 seconds.
99 seconds, or the government bond has been sold out via the digital platform or the wallet.
I think what I would like to add is that when we think about the new platform, how you start the setup and design objective is very important. People may start from the existing process, keeping all the stakeholder. That's one approach. But with the new bond platform, we start from the customer.
Yeah.
How to give the convenience and benefit
ครับ
and expectation.
ครับ
We would like to serve the customer first. That's why we say, okay, this is the wallet for the customer. And with that platform, I can believe that in the future we can expand not just to the bond, we can expand to any digital asset.
I think that this project should be one of the kind of case study, I think, for the organization or the company that are working on the digital transformation. I think back to Her Excellency, I think we are hearing from the business side and the government project. I would like to ask from your point of view around, I think number one, we talk about lots of digital transformation project. In the regulatory point of view, there should be something that the regulator should really focusing on or take a look at it. I think that would be the first question. And second, as a follow-up question, is that a lots of SME or small business in the country are affected hugely because of the COVID-19. And what would be your key kind of action plan that you think about on how to help all of those private sector?
In terms of, going back to Professor Taeed mentions about data is the new currency. I think it's very important for policymakers, not just bank regulators, but policymakers, the government, to ensure the safety and the integrity of this data, and confidentiality of individuals are also important. For countries like Cambodia, I think digital transformation but it would be slower without government support on that. A lot of the time, I hear people coming to ask whether we have digital banking license. And my question is, because when you go digital, the first thing you need to understand is who is behind the screen that you're dealing with. You need to know the identity of the person. And so the first question I ask back is that, would you need a branch to do the KYC of your customer? And obviously, because we don't have the infrastructure in place, they said yes, because we need to verify the ID. And I say, in this case, it won't be called a digital banking license, or just a bank license, right? Because digital is supposed to happen, everything happen online in terms of the KYC and loan disbursements and payment and etc. So there's going to be a big role for the government. Beside the regulations that I mentioned earlier, there's also and the whole infrastructure of digital platform that need to be in place. In terms of SME being affected by COVID, I don't think we have any sort of magic solution to this problem. It's happening everywhere in the world. But during this particular time, I think it's very important for SME to be able to continue to access to liquidity. Hopefully, this is a temporary thing, and that it's going to be over soon. There's different sort of prediction from experts. Some say 2021. The IMF project a V-shaped recovery. They may change their mind. It's going to be L-shaped. Who knows? But in the meantime, what we want to ensure is that, from a central bank perspective, is that first our bank has ample liquidities to continue to support SME. If it is short-term time, then SME may need liquidity to pay their employees for that short period of time where there's no customer. So for banking regulators like the central bank, it is very important to make sure of that. We also want to probably call to the private sector to understand that, particularly here in Cambodia, when we impose certain regulation during peacetime, there's a lot of complaint that it's very costly to implement. Now something happened suddenly. We are now able to go back and use we used to ask bank to keep a lot of reserve requirement with us and comply with a very big ratio of liquidity coverage ratios and so on. And now in crisis time, we're now able to ask them to use those buffer to support their activities. So what I wanted them to know is that, this is like buying insurance. You don't wait until you're sick to go and buy an insurance. You buy when you are healthy. And this is exactly the same. And you need to understand that if we as regulator ask you to do something, and I know a lot of the audience here are from the banking industry, we ask you to do something, try to understand our perspective. We are here for the interest of the public, of the financial stability as a whole, and not for any particular shareholders' return. So it may be painful at first, but you'll see now it can help you. So that's something I think I wanted to tell the audience here.
Thank you very much. I understand that we are almost run out of time and we're supposed to jump into the Q&A. But actually, I have one last question to ask Professor Olinga. Since you're an expert in China e-commerce market, can you just quickly share us what is a key learning and what is the key success factor for all of us in CLMVT country to actually learn from the China? Can you just wrap it up in like 1 minute, please, Professor?
Understand that things like Alipay are now doing 1 million transactions per second, very close to it. So we're talking about big change. And we have released in China a new digital currency, digital yuan. So that's a new, of course, some will say that's just to undermine the dollar. That's also true. But it is it's the way of the future. The committee that I sit on, the 7-person committee, we're responsible for 70% of global market in cryptocurrency and blockchain. And that's $103 trillion. That's 10 times the internet. So this is the movement of direction. And what China is doing is using the One Belt, One Road initiative to try and amalgamate their strategies and their banking out there. And One Belt, One Road, there are many of these BRI projects that are moving there. And finally, it's towards what we're trying to do throughout the kind of a closed BRI world, is look for frictionless trade and frictionless transactions between countries. Even here in the UK, we're working on projects with post-Brexit to bring frictionless trade to Britain, because Britain has no time now for 10 years of agreements. And just so one final thing, I want to talk about one project, one sentence, which is not in China, which we're delivering now in the Middle East, in Dubai and Saudi. And that is a new banking system that blends everything we've been talking about today. And that is where you cannot just bank assets, hard assets, like money and cash and diamonds and land, but also soft assets like love, happiness, hope, and generosity. And so this is where banking is moving to be able to bring all kinds of assets together, not just tangible, but intangible assets. And I think that's the future of banking. Thank you.
From the floor to Kun Chea Serey. So the question is that what is the most critical challenge for bankers in this situation? Thank you for the question.
I think the most challenging now is probably, first of all, to preserve liquidity, make sure you have enough liquidity to continue your business. Second of all, you have to be creative and be agile to adapt to the changes in consumer behavior. And we talk about electronic payment, we talk about e-banking, etc. So that will be something that banks need to be paying attention to.
Thank you. So we are out of time, and sadly, I have to close this session. And really enjoy hearing all of the perspective from Kun Somkid, Her Excellency, and also Professor. Thank you for joining us today. And I hope that all of the content that we are sharing with the audience today is going to be beneficial to everyone. So thank you very much ครับขอบคุณครับ
Thank you very much, Mr. Warashat and all the panelists for the excellent discussion today. We have learned a lot from your experiences that you share with us, especially how the digital transformation and the new landscape inspire us to prepare for the future of financial system going forward.